So the radium release hitch is a very useful hitch. Sometimes you find it necessary to support the load on a load line with something going wrong in the system, where we have to hold the load and then release under tension of the load. Right now we have the MPDs that pretty much handle any situation we have except for passing knots. But occasionally we need to still know how to tie the radium release hitch, which is a hitch that allows us to release tension on a loaded line and still have the load supported in the air. We're going to take a 30-foot, 33-foot piece of 8mm cord. We're going to put figure 8 on a bite on both ends, properly dressed, properly tied, properly safetied. And we're going to take one of those ends and we're going to clip in the load side carabiner with the gate down and out. The other carabiner in the load release hitch is the one that's going to be anchored to the anchor. And so we're going to clip that in to start with to help us build it, or you can have a partner hold the two carabiners as you build the release hitch. So we've got the cord clipped to the load side. We're going to run it up to the anchor carabiner, back down through the load carabiner, and at this point what we have is a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage. This will help hold the load. Now at this point we're going to put a munter hitch onto the anchor end carabiner. And again, when I get the munter hitch in place, I want it to be in the extending position, meaning I don't want to have the munter hitch flipping side to side in our anchor carabiner. I want it in a position so that the hitch can be extended immediately without having to flip the munter hitch. So I'm going to build this a little bit longer than I probably would otherwise. I'm going to come up with our rope, creating our 3-to-1 mechanical advantage at this point. The munter hitch, I'm going to take the working end, put a loop behind the standing part, and I'm going to clip that in to my load side carabiner. Now, basically what we're going to do is follow this back through and clip it into the carabiner. There are times that you want to have this thing engaged in holding the load right from the get-go. So we're going to back up just a step here. The load side carabiner can be prusiked on to the load line. And at this point we can tighten everything up as much as we can. Okay? Then hold that in place as we bring this up to complete the munter hitch. We've now already got some of the load taken in and placed onto the load release hitch. So we've got a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage followed by a munter hitch. Now we're going to lock it off until we're ready to use it. Now before I get anything else involved here, it's really important that when you tie this up and get it ready to go, that the free end or the working end is closest to the gate. And it's also very important that this bite coming up here does not jump over into the middle of the munter hitch. If that happens, nothing moves. You got problems that you're going to have to solve, and they're not easy to solve. So make sure that this strand coming up from the load side stays outside the munter hitch. Okay, so now at this point, to tie it off, we either do a half hitch followed by an overhand knot, or a mule hitch followed by an overhand knot. As I've said before, I prefer the mule hitch, so I'm going to tie that. take the working end, tuck it underneath, roll it underneath, and then come around and poke a bite through that loop. And that's my slip munter hitch, or excuse me, the slip mule hitch. Going to pull that bite through and create a nice big bite here. So there's my mule. This other bite, I'm going to wrap around everything and tie an overhand knot. The overhand knot is the backup to the mule hitch. It keeps the mule from coming loose. Now, notice that when you tie the overhand knot around the bundle of cord, the tail of that overhand is parallel to the rest of the hitch. If you find that the tail comes out perpendicular, that's not an overhand knot. That's a half hitch. That's an easy way to tell the difference. If the tail comes out to the side, it's a half hitch. If the tail comes out parallel, it's an overhand knot. Now, it is important that you tie the mule up next to the munter and below it. And it's important that the overhand knot be tied next to the mule and also underneath it. It's an interesting phenomenon that if you've got a lot of distance between your mule and your munter, and I've seen it done, people will tie the overhand nicely and correctly, but instead of sliding it up underneath the mule, they get sloppy and they'll allow it to come up above the mule. And if it comes above the mule, guess what? It turns into a half hitch. Without untying it, depending upon which side of the mule it's tied, it's either a half hitch or an overhand knot. So make sure you have it tied correctly. Again, the correct way is the tail comes out parallel, it's a square knot. Now, how about the rest of this cord? You've got almost 10 meters of cord total. Some of it's taken up in here, about a meter's worth or a little bit more. So what do you do with all the rest of this stuff? Well, there's a couple of things you can do with it. First of all, you want to take the other end and clip it off to some anchor. We want to close the system so that we don't lose the end of the rope through the load release hitch accidentally. So once that's anchored off, there's a couple things you can do. You can just kind of let this stuff hang. You can stuff it into a small sack, or got to start daisy chaining at the anchor end so that when we need more rope, okay, we're going to clip that off with a separate carabiner, and then when we need it, when we release the hitch, we can just unclip this and give a little rope so this extends, give a little bit more rope so it extends, give a little bit more rope so it extends. So we build from the anchor side toward the hitch side, and then let out as much rope as we need.